So Ramjoo's diary, page 343, and we have Shalaja starting us off. Go
Devon.
ahead, Jabala.
Third tour, North India. An hour in inspecting 2 or 3 of the gardens, but none was found to be suitable for our purpose, and we returned. Again, after having our meals, we started in another boat, this time going along the Sukur side of the river. At a distance of about a mile, we found some more pieces of cultivated land. Some belongs to a rich Muslim owner. Some is public property belonging to the tomb of renowned Muslim local claimant, Bakal Shah. While the third piece, partly cultivated with vegetables and a few mango and date trees, belongs to a Hindu gentleman. The latter, although not quite an ideal piece, was the best we had yet come across. Being situated in this quiet locality, just adjoining the river with pretty surroundings and at a convenient distance of about a mile from the humdrum of the city proper, both of us agreed as to its suitability for our purpose. We soon returned to Mr. Rustumji and asked him to inquire about this land. It is found to be on sale at a reasonable price. Still, we decide to see some more gardens towards the railway station and beyond it. After doing the day's work, we went out for a stroll in the city and along the bank of the river towards the station side. The river with its picturesque surroundings is the chief attraction of the town. Nature and science seem to have cooperated in giving it an extra charm by providing it with a gigantic hanging bridge, famous for its architecture, spanning the huge river without any pillars in a graceful curve, and a tiny island exactly in the center of the river. This island, which looks beautiful with its fine walls, jetties, gardens, and fine buildings, is called Sat Bela and is occupied by a Hindu saint. It adds great romance to the pretty scene. After having our supper, we repaired to the travelers' shelter through well-kept and electrically illuminated roads and wrote out a report of our activities to Baba, giving a favorable impression of Sukur to be suitable for our permanent stay. June 12, 1924. Again, we continued our inspection soon after having our breakfast. Almost all the gardens available near the railway station and city proper were examined. Some of them were approved by Ardeshir from the business point of view, but none satisfied me as to the surroundings and situation. In the afternoon, we engaged a carriage and went to the old town of Sukur on the other side of the railway station. There we visited many gardens for miles along the river and even in the interior, but none surpassed our selection of yesterday. And thus we returned to the traveler's shelter late after sunset. We had a good taste of the heat too, which is terrible. And yet people here say it is very cool nowadays. In full summer, the mercury rises to 108 and 109 degrees. This cooled down my enthusiasm for Sukur, and I penned my final report to Baba disapproving Sukur as a permanent place to put up for good because of the extreme climate. Further, I asked for instructions by telegram whether to return to Quetta or remain here, as we had practically finished with our investigations. Not having received wire instructions from Baba, we decided to pass our time in sightseeing Rohiri, another town on the other side of the Indus. We passed along the famous bridge connecting Sukur and Rohiri over the Indus. This giant structure provides both railway and public road. Its magnitude impressed us all the more from the close inspection of its single great span over the great giant river. We inspected more gardens here, but as expected, not met with our choice. The rest of the day was passed eagerly taking turns at the station to see if a telegram had come. After supper, both of us repaired to the station with our beddings to catch the Quetta rain in case the telegram had come by then. Still not finding the expected wire in the letter case, I inquired personally in the telegram and station master's office, respectively, to see if it had been left out through outside. But I was informed that there was no such telegram from Quetta. The train was already on the platform. After some hesitation, we decided mutually to escape from the choking atmosphere of Sukur immediately. Thus, at the 11th hour, I rushed for the tickets, and after getting the same, we boarded the train. After passing a very uncomfortable hot night in a crowded third-class carriage, we reached Quetta this afternoon. The contrasting coolness here all the more prejudiced me against Sukur and the hell of its climate. As soon as we reached Rusi's place, we were bewildered, as may well be imagined, upon hearing that Baba has left for Sukur with Pirosha last evening. That means Baba and ourselves were traveling last night in opposite directions. At first, I thought of going back to Sukur immediately, but to avoid further complications, I finally decided to await Baba's return or call. The rest of the day was passed gloomingly, repenting for our hasty action and quarreling between ourselves. As Ardishir disclaimed any responsibility in this unfortunate incident. Baba returned to Quetta this afternoon, and we were severely taken to task for the jumble committed by us. And for a long time, Baba kept on reproaching us. Baba did send a telegram instructing us to await his arrival at Sukur. And it reached Sukur in time before our fateful departure. But it was misplaced by the staff under the station's master's paper, as was found out by Pirosha and Baba yesterday. After some time, Baba related the incidents of his visit to Sukur. He personally inspected some gardens and finally selected the one approved by us. Through Holaram and Rustumji, Baba has already purchased the land. The general appearance and situation of the Sukur no doubt appealed to Baba as it did to me the first day. It was our prolonged stay there that gave us an idea of its abnormal climate. But it is too late now. Baba also described to us his visit to Bachal Shah's tomb and his having encountered a man absorbed in divinity there. In the evening, Baba and party went for a motor spin, which greatly refreshed us. Again, Baba discussed the question of staying at Sukur until residential quarters are built on the purchased land. Baba decided to hire a suitable bungalow or house on rent for the mandali to stay still then. I'm instructed to go to Sukur tomorrow and engage a good place for Baba and the whole mandali to stay in a suitable locality and preferably in the vicinity of the purchased land. I was also asked to visit Bachal Shah's tomb and see the one absorbing divinity there, as well as go to Satbela. Mama also asked me to keep in view a suitable house for my family too.
Thank you, Shalaja. I'll
Thank
take a turn now. June 17, 1924. According to Baba's instructions, I left Quetta yesterday and once again came to Sukur this morning. After some inspections, I selected a bungalow and engaged it on a lease of 6 months. Then I repaired to the newly purchased land and had a look. at it more closely. But for the climate, all seems to prove an ideal arrangement. I had a talk with the neighboring landlord and made some necessary inquiries. After this, as per orders, I came to Buckleshaw's tomb, which is a stone's throw from the purchased land. After paying my respects at the tomb, I searched for the person answering the description given by Baba and was informed that he was out, but would be back in due time. In the meantime, I marked a lady with some similarity in appearance to Hazrat Babajan of Pune, moving about the place, muttering some inaudible words every now and then. She chanced to come across me and looked me full in the face. And for the first time, I marked an intelligent and normal look in her face. She abruptly, but quite intelligently, asked me, "Who is your master?" I promptly replied the one word, Mer Baba. Thereupon she uttered the words, "King, Emperor," and again lost her intelligence and began to mutter queer words and moved about. I inquired about this lady and her antecedents. Bakal Shah, whose tomb is still greatly revered in Sukur by both Hindus and Muslims, had been a great saint of his time and had an immense following of devotees. In the lifetime of Bakal Shah, this lady once came for his blessing. She became greatly devoted to the saint and began to serve him diligently, irrespective of her household duties. After some months, with great difficulty, her husband, who was alive at the time, prevailed upon her to return home. But after a few months, she came back to Bakal Shah and began to serve him with great devotion. Again, her husband and family members tried to take her back, but this time, Bakal Shah advised them to let her alone. And since that time, she continues to remain in the saint's service, and by this time has become absorbed in divinity. Up to this day, she is residing near the shrine in an overpowered state of mind and is addressed as Mastani Mai. By this time, the absorbed one, answering to Baba's description, appeared, to whom I gave the sum of rupees 51 given by Baba for him. He was all the time marked by me, smiling and mightily pleased with himself. I was about to leave the place when I came across a clean shaven, holy man, addressed by all as Mustan Shah, and who also seemed to have his permanent residence here by having a hut opposite the tomb. Somebody asked me in his presence, from where did I come? I said, from Bombay side. I was again questioned whether from Bombay proper or the districts. Thinking nobody would know of Lonavla, I added, I come from a town near Pune. At this, Mustan Shah looked very interested and asked me as to how a certain man was. What about his family? And so on. I at once put myself on guard lest he might be pulling my leg and put him counter questions. But he seemed to know almost each and every Muslim family of Lonavla. He described my own family and asked how were they. I said almost all had crossed over to the other side of existence. Then he put in, what about Abdullah's son and daughter, who were very young when I was there at Lanavla? I replied, the daughter had been married and was in Pune, while that son was before him, meaning myself. I thoroughly enjoyed the dramatic situation. After this, Mustan Shah made me sit near him and talked for a considerable time about his solitary stay on a hill at Lanavla, all the time lavishly treating me with fruits. I questioned him about what had made him take to the ascetic life, and he related the following story. My parents were very religious people, and as soon as I began to understand things, I was made to learn the Holy Quran. Before I was out of my teens, I could recite the whole of the Holy Scripture very flowingly and had made some part of it by heart too. The general rules and systems of religion were well picked up by me. I began the deeper study of our religion and took to understanding the meaning of the Quran. I kept on progressing up to that line, which means God is nearer to a person than his jugular vein. And here I stuck. The literal translation did not satisfy me. I began approaching great learned people, but my curiosity increased all the more when I was told that the deeper truth of religion was a thing to be experienced rather than understood. So I left off my literal studies and took to recitations and concentration. And it was during this period of my life that I was in Lanavla, where I passed considerable time on a hill in meditation. Thereafter, I passed about 12 years in travel, and it is another 12 years that I am here. Mayor, could you unmute and continue, please?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, David, Mayor Karan. I meant Mera
Okay.
Daruvala.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll get to you in a minute, in 10 minutes.
Well, he said, I at last met somebody who explained it to me. And what is the meaning? I again asked him, at which he smiled and said it was beyond intelligence. In the intelligence. In the afternoon, I went to Satbela myself, and the guide were rowed across the river to this important place of worship of the local Hindus. We mounted the few fine stone stairs, and after passing some arches, came near the hall of audience. Here we had to leave our shoes, and then we approached the special seat on a swing, on which was seated an imposing personality. He was the head of which institution and the descendant of the renowned Hindu saint. The swing was gently moved by some of the attendants, while others moved silver-mounted fans, etc. An atmosphere of great sanity and dignity prevailed. After paying due respects, I offered the present which Baba had given me for the purpose. It was accepted and passed on to the attendants. Then he talked with me for some time very kindly and also gave me a return present and asked the attendants to feed me. The institution is carried on generally with public donations. Food is served once a day to anybody who comes here for religious purpose, and thus scores of needy persons get the benefit of generous hospitality. I leave for Quetta once again by the 10 p.m. train. The remaining pages of regular diary are either torn or missing. To complete the period covered by the diary, Ramjoo's later narration describing the events of the period is given. It is titled After a New Seat, 1924. The ensuing week was again passed in lengthy discussions in settling up details of the Mandali's permanent stay. At first, for a few days, the topic centered around Sukkar and the newly purchased land, where Baba talked about building their own quarters. After cultivating an orchard on the rest of the land, which again was to be turned into legal trust with some of the Mandalis as the trustees to provide maintenance to all of them and their families according to respective shares as per individual needs, circumstance out of the income of that institution. But persistent objects raised against the abnormal succor heat by those of the party who had personally experienced, as well as the telltale contrast with Quetta Sukkar program, in which, in spite of all the spade work, came to be cancelled. By the end of the week, and Karachi came the third favorite, as it was proved beyond doubt that it had a normal climate all through the season. Again, same pair,
Mayor, could you just repeat this sentence, please?
but the persistent objects raised against the abnormal sukkar heat by those of the party which had personal experience, as well as the telltale contrast with the Quetta through frequent visits to Sukkot prevailed at last, and the Sukkot program, in spite of all the spade work, came to be cancelled by the end of the week. And Karachi became the third favorite, as it was proved beyond doubt that it had a normal climate all through the seasons. All through the season. Again, the same pair that had gone to Sukkot was sent to Karachi, repeat the inspections and inquires on the spot. But by that time, the rest of the Mandali had already been wired to start for Sukkot with all the necessary belongings. Hence, one of the pair going to Karachi instructed to let them proceed to Quetta and store up the luggage at Sukkot, pending a settlement at Karachi. According to the same was taken down at Sukkot, the scores of trunks, beddings, and whatnot coverings a large portion of the platform caused no little flutter on the station, while many were heard to ask whether it was a circus or a dramatic company. Nearly half a dozen bullock carts were required to take away all the things to the appointed place, and it was nearly midnight when everything was safely put under lock and key. On 30th June 1924, once again, the full Mandali came together at Quetta, save for the pair who were in search for a suitable place for their permanent stay at Karachi. Jai Baba.
You have another 2 minutes, Mayor, if you want to continue.
No, now let somebody, because it's the next chapter.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
David Mayor Karan, it's your turn. Oh, he might not be at his machine, so. Oh, here
Thank
he
you.
is.
I've started. Yeah. So we just have to get in one. And yeah, ready. So I start death of a Mandali,
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Honey Bunny.
Yes, that's right, Mayor.
Sorry. I think I am frozen or you are frozen.
Oh,
We hear you.
we hear you.
Yeah.
Do you hear us, David?
Hmm.
So Betty, why don't you take over till he
Okay.
unfreezes? Thanks.
Death of a Mandali. All were found to be healthy and cheerful, save for Kodadad Farhad, popularly known among the Mandali by his nickname Nervous. He was found to be slightly indisposed with a fever due to a wound on his knee, which the horse Sufi had inflicted upon him by way of a parting kick through carelessness. Until the arrangements, shall I go on or?
David, do you hear us yet?
Yes, Eugene, yes.
Oh, good. Oh, so go ahead. Thanks a lot, Betty, for
Sure.
Until the arrangements were ready at Karachi, the Mandali were to be allowed a regular holiday. Besides enjoying the bracing and beautiful climate of Quetta, all had nothing particular to do save engage themselves in reading, hearing the gramophone, or an occasional motor spin or walk in the fine surrounding countryside. While there was a plentiful supply of fruits, pastry, and tasty vegetables and assorted dishes at dinner. The first week was thus passed very cheerfully by all save Nervous. His temperature began to keep steadily and continuously at a high point in spite of complete medical treatment under the direct supervision of a European civil surgeon that was begun from the very first day of his arrival. And when the doctor began to suspect the fever to enteric in, in spite of the easy and holiday circumstances, the atmosphere began to assume gloominess. By the end of the week, the civil surgeon decidedly declared the case to be typhoid. The same day, Nervous was carefully removed on a stretcher to a separate and well ventilated house in a quiet locality. Continuous nursing attendance throughout 24 hours was arranged amongst the fittest members of the Mandali, who thus kept near his bedside, attentive and alert every second of the day. In short, nothing was paid to save him. Money was spent like water, while the nurses exercised greater care in following the doctor's advice and instructions that was possible. Elsewhere, especially since Baba came to see the patient every now and then and at odd hours through night and day, and personally observed the daily report and other arrangements. But for all that, his condition began to cause great anxiety to all, and naturally the spirits of the Mandali were dampened beyond description. From the day Nervous was removed on stretcher, Baba began to pass offhand remarks as to the case being hopeless, and that he will be the first of the two or three who were to die from the Mandali before the circle is completed. There are many who remember Baba having passed the later hint as early as the Manjil days, and accordingly, following Nervous's death at Quetta, Arjun died at Lunawala after a lapse of 2.5 years. But because of such remarks, the treatment and nursing were not made to suffer in the least. Baba insisted upon the best possible efforts to be made, and those who were in charge of the patient were asked to carry out unpleasant and painful tasks as if it were a sacred duty according to the letter and spirit of the doctor's orders. In the last stage of the illness, beside the European civil surgeon, another well known Indian doctor was also called in twice every day. On the 16th July, Baba decided to leave for Karachi with two or three members of the party. In the morning, he visited the local cemetery of the Parsis, since there is no Tower of Silence at Quetta, and selected a certain spot where Firoz Shah was asked to arrange for Nervous's burial in case he died after Baba's departure to Karachi. Baba also arranged for a sum of rupees 2,500 to be set aside, out of which rupees 500 were to be utilized for the monument and religious ceremonies, and the rest to be handed over to the trustees of the cemetery for cemetery funds in his memory if such a contingency arrived. The rest of the Mandali were asked to cheer up and not to lose heart. As soon as Nawaz recovered or died, Baba told them to follow him to Karachi. In the former case, Nawaz was to be carefully brought over to Karachi for convalescence, and in the later case, the Mandali were instructed to come away as soon as the formal ceremonies and burial were over. But do not leave a stone unturned to bring him around even at the 11th hour, were Baba's final words when he left Quetta in the afternoon. When Baba and party reached the station of Mak the same afternoon, a telegraphic message was received that soon after their departure, Nervous left his motel coil at about 2 p.m. and proved himself as the first to have kept up his promise of life surrenderance to his master, for whom he had great feelings, regard, and reverence. Karachi. Baba and party reached Karachi on the 17th of July in the morning. The next day, A commodious bungalow with a tiny hut, pretty garden, and a bathing tank was arranged near the botanical gardens for the rest of the Mandali, who were to come shortly. Baba also had a personal inspection of a few selected pieces of land that the advance party had in view for their permanent stay. On the 19th, Baba and party laid a flying visit to Maghar Pir, situated at a distance of 10 miles from Karachi by motor cars. There is located a shrine of a well-known saint, besides a number of hot water springs renowned for their medical properties. Separate bathing arrangements are in existence to afford facilities to all classes of people. Scores of lepers were found lying about the place hoping for a cure. On the 20th, all came back from Quetta and also brought the luggage that had been left over at Sukkur, where the agreement for the purchase of the land and the bungalow lease were all cancelled after handsomely compensating the different parties concerned. Once again, discussions on the future program took place. Beside the fruit gardening, this time Baba added a new aspect to the future life. Once the establishment was started, he said, beside the labor work, the Mandali will have to conduct a department of feeding and clothing the poor and needy. Not that a poor asylum was to be opened, but the Mandali were told that by turn they will have to form themselves in searching parties to fish out from the nooks and corners of that great city and its suburbs persons such as the most neglected, disabled, and needy who do not stand a chance of relief under ordinary circumstances. And the search was not to be made haphazard, but very systematically, and for which some motor lorries were also proposed to be purchased. Besides doing all the physical duties, they were informed they will also have to continuously repeat God's name mentally. In view of the recent calamity amongst them, the Mandali were greatly depressed and dejected, and none came forward to show interest and enthusiasm in that very troublesome plan. Finding them in that condition, with his characteristic abruptness, Baba suddenly stopped the topic and set up quite a new ball rolling the next day. Such members, who had family ties and business tangles, were offered freedom to remain at their respective places and take to their occupations. That being agreed upon, Baba cancelled the whole program at one bold stroke and decided to leave for Bombay, from where all could disperse. That evening, Baba gave a bath to every one of the Mandali by sitting over the tank and pouring water over them, and left for Bombay the following morning, instructing the rest to follow him as soon as possible with all their belongings. Bombay. On the 25th of July 1924, all came together again in the Irani mansion. By the end of that month, however, one after another, the Mandali at large were completely dispersed and all went away to their respective places, leaving only half a dozen of them remaining with Baba to keep company with him in his further activities. A large amount of money that Bhai Daulat Mai Jahangir had placed at Baba's disposal was also disbursed away. Certain amounts were set aside in connection with Hazrat Baba Jan's and Sri Maharaja's institutions respectively. Rupees 3,000 were handed over for technical education for the poor in Persia under a trust to Mr. Hizzi Behdin, the editor of the Gujarat Weekly, and a small amount was distributed among such of the Mandali who required a lift in their external affairs. After these arrangements, Baba decided to start upon extensive touring and tramping for an indefinite period throughout India and bowing down to pilgrims whenever met. The ladies were asked to stay at Sakori with Sri Maharaj until the time the party returned from the tour and put up a fixed place. Out of the remaining 6, 2 members were asked to keep up at Bombay and Pune respectively, and the other 4 of them were asked to prepare themselves for the unknown excursion. The latter were asked to provide themselves well with the necessary bedding, clothing, footwear, etc., as they were told that once they started on the tour, nothing new will be purchased. Consequently, the luggage with the party became too heavy for self-handling. Padri was appointed manager to look after all arrangements and conduct for the tour. Finally, they came over to Pune to take a start from there. The detailed narration of the extensive ramble follows under next heading.
Thanks, David Mayer. Betty, could you unmute and continue, please?
Can you scroll down here? 20, the search for 5,000 pilgrims South and Central India at Madras. On Friday, the 2nd August, Baba and the party started from Pune by the afternoon train for Raichur. Many of the Mandali were present to see them off. Just a short while after the train had left Pune, Baba began his program of bowing to the pilgrims. 2 of the latter were found to be traveling in the same carriage. Baba fed them, gave them some loose coins, and touched their feet with his forehead. Baba casually inquired of Padri at what time they would be reaching Raichur, and when he was informed that the train would reach there at 4 o'clock the following morning, under the excuse that it was very inconvenient hour, Baba decided to proceed to Madras. As the tickets were already purchased for Raichur, the difference in the fare was made up to the railway authorities, and thus the beginning of a very uncertain ramble was made. They arrived at Madras Central Station on the 3rd at 9:30 p.m. and took shelter in the Sheikh Siddiqui Choultry rest house near the station. The following day, preparations and enquiries were made to go to Porto Novo and that side of the country, where heavy floods were reported to have swept over the countryside, causing great damage to life and property. Grams, cheese, and breads were taken as provisions for the journey in that distressed area. In the evening, the party came to the Madras Beach station of the SI Railway to start towards Porto Novo. On account of the floods, it was said many breaches had occurred along the railway lines, and consequently, only one train was running every day. Hence, enormous crowds were witnessed on and about the station, eager to get tickets and room in that solitary train. Somehow, Padri managed to squeeze in through the surging crowds and reach the booking office window, only to be informed that the issue of tickets was stopped, owing to the train being already overcrowded. He had to wade back again through the jostling crowds with all the odds and ends about his person, such as timetables, papers, loose coins, which he had always to carry in handfuls to enable Baba to distribute the same among pilgrims, and various other knickknacks. Being the manager, he was expected also to be a ready reckoner, a general directory, a walking wardrobe, and a storehouse of miscellaneous articles required by Baba at odd moments in the journey, and so to move about heavily loaded among the crowds was no easy affair. In spite of the booking said to be closed, it was marked that the station master, a big bulging fellow, all red in the face, was issuing slips to some selected passengers who used them to get tickets in exchange for the same at the booking office. It was a funny sight to see the fuming and fumbling officer moving about the platform, going in and out of the room with a small crowd always kicking about his heels. Perhaps he was making hay while the sun shone. Bailey also managed to approach the worthy, but both of them being hot-tempered, the result was only a hot breeze. At last, Baba asked Padre to book themselves by the second class, and when even this was said to be stopped, he was instructed to get tickets for the first class, but it was not destined for them to go to Porto Novo. Even the first class tickets were refused, and before any other arrangements could be made, the train hissed out of the platform. Padre was greatly taken to task in not coming earlier to the station in view of the abnormal situation. But the program was canceled and the party came back to the rest house. The following day, it was planned to go to the Nilgiri Hills instead of Porto Novo, and fresh arrangements were made for the new journey. The party left Madras on the 5th August at about 6:30 in the evening for Uti. As the next change was to be made at Metropolitan Junction on the following morning, the party somehow managed to go to sleep under the benches and over luggage carriers in the third-class carriage, thus making sufficient room for Baba over a part of a bench to lie down. The next morning, station after station was passed, but no sign of the Metropolitan Junction. A fellow passenger was at last asked as to when that blessed junction would be reached. He simply looked amazed and said that the train was not going to Metropolitan at all. Then it transpired that at Madras, the party had boarded a direct carriage going to some other destination, and at a certain junction overnight, while they were asleep or preoccupied, the same carriage was detached and put onto another train. On the first next station after this discovery, with a great hustle bustle, they all got down and came back by another train to that junction. The way Padre was lectured by Baba for that can alone be appreciated by himself. As to use his own expression, he simply smarted under those wordy lashes. Anyhow, after some delay, the party came to Metropolitan, or as Baba used to refer to it, petroleum. By that time, Baba became very ill, as at leaving Madras, he had begun to pass loose stools. But in spite of that, the journey was continued. In the Nilgiri Hills, at about 12:45, they started in the small, toy-like mountain railway. It has only two classes, the first and the third. The former resembled an ordinary railway compartment, while the latter, in which the party was traveling, was nothing better than a primitive type of tram car, open on all sides with curtains as the only protection against wind and rain. The snail-like speed at which the tiny little engine managed to pull the train up the hills proved a welcome feature of the journey, as it allowed the party to enjoy fully the fascinating scenery all around, for which the hills are only too well known. In that rainy season, which was in full swing at the time, the hills looked all the more beautiful, with the silvery clouds flitting here and there. The more they topped the heights, the more their majestic charm was revealed to their eyesight. But at the same time, the atmosphere began to be extremely uncomfortable, owing to keen, cold winds that began to sweep through the all-open third-class carriage.
Thank you, Betty.
Okay.
Shailaja, would you like to take another turn?
Yeah, sure. By the time they reached Ooty, which is the terminus of this hill railway, and which is as high as 7,250 feet from the sea level, almost all were quivering and chattering with cold, although it was only 4 in the afternoon. Two of them were sent in the bazaar by Baba to get dal or any kind of vegetable dish to eat with the bread, which they had with them. In spite of a hotel to hotel search, none was found to be available, and the party had to be contented with the bread and grams for the time being. Baba was almost laid up with fever by that time. However, they again left Ooty the same evening at 6:20 and came back to uh, Kunur at 7:45. Owing to fog, the night was pitch dark, and still there was only one lamp burning, and that flickeringly on the whole of the platform. Uh, Here, they succeeded in getting a square meal in a Hindu hotel, which they found out through the help and guidance of a Bombay tea merchant. But it was found to be too insanitary to lodge there. And Gustaji preferred to get himself frozen to ice cream out in the cold on the railway platform rather than pass the night there. However, the party did not find it necessary to go to the lengths of coating pneumonia by occupying the platform, as the local station master was good enough to allow them the shelter of a first class empty carriage that was to remain in siding till the following morning. All of them slept well, save Baba, who passed a very bad night on account of high fever, which did not leave him in the morning. In spite of that, Baba persisted in starting on foot towards that petroleum of a Metro Palayam junction at the next morning at 7:20, which was about 25 miles away from Kunur. They again came across the same Hindu tea merchant who invited that party to tea and the great tea plantations, but he was politely put off and they continued their march. After walking a few miles, the party took rest near a small village. Expecting Baba, the four of them took bread and cheese for breakfast, which they were carrying with them. Baba also delivered a homely ending with remark to Padri, don't ever become a Baba if you can help it. Rest of the tramp through the beautiful hills was made very slowly, halting there and there on account of the fever that was still raging with Baba. Although a large quantity of tea is exported to other countries from the Nilgiris, yet the same was not found to be available in any of the refreshment shops that were passed by. It was like a famine of coal at Newcastle. Wherever the party inquired for tea, coffee was offered to them. As Baba insisted upon having tea, the party made searching inquiries and efforts for the same, but all to no purpose. Baba thus did not take anything that morning throughout the tramp, though he allowed the rest of them to take a cup of coffee each at a wayside refreshment shop while passing through the village. The search for 5,000 pilgrims, Baba distributed the grams that they had with them in handfuls to the children encountered there. And thus, by the time the tramp came to an end, he had finished up the whole of the stock. The tramp was not continued exactly to the program, as they all took to train again at the station of Kalar after walking 16 miles and thus covered the remaining 5 miles to Metro Palayam by rail. The return journey to Madras was completed comfortably and without any untoward incident. The party got a small 10-seat compartment to themselves throughout the night travel and arrived back at Madras at 8:30 in the morning of the 8th August. That same day, one of the party declared himself to have had enough of the ramble and requested to be excused. The next morning, he was allowed to go to Pune when most of the spare luggage, including their heavy old coats, were also sent away with him. In the evening, Baba and the remaining 3 companions also came once again to the station to leave for Calcutta. The latest plan formed was to reach Calcutta and Haridwar, and from there to walk back to Sakori through Kashi, Banaras, and such other places of pilgrimage, reaching the final destination by the end of January. Owing to the great rush of crowds, the third-class booking was found to be stopped. Using his own discretion, Padri brought interclass tickets, but was greatly rebuked afterwards for that extra wagons. But had he not done so, even though he would have been taken to task for being inactive and unresourceful. Such was Baba's method in the travel. While boarding the train, some English-dressed Parsi gentlemen were encountered on the platform. In spite of their hailings, Padri put them off. But they succeeded in netting Ramjoo. Although the party had been instructed to remain incognito, Ramjoo made the slip and in reply to their inquiries, blurted out that they belonged to Meher Baba's party. The Parsis seemed to have heard about Baba, and upon learning the news, one and all flocked about the carriage in which Baba had already taken his seat. Their spokesman greeted Baba in a singularly frank style, Sahib Ji Meher Baba. But the first words he blurted out in a loud voice, and then turning towards his companions with, "Oh, Peston, Rustam, come on, greet Meher Baba." He continued shouting on with the great enthusiasm, but for all lack of formalities and ceremonies, they greeted with sincerity and even invited the party to the local travelers' shelter with that noisy. An unexpected send-off. Baba's party left Madras at 8 p.m. on the 9th August.
Thanks, Shilaja. We'll pick up here on page 358 next time.
Baba.